All right, let's see if this thing's going here. So far, maybe. I think we're getting there. There is Instagram. Let's see if Substack wants to do the thing. I think the answer is yes. Substack is about to do the thing. I will check out this stream myself. Awesome. I think it's working. Welcome, folks. Welcome to the live stream. For those of you that are new, I do this live stream every Monday at 7 p.m. Pacific, generally on a topic from Dev Leader Weekly, which is generally on a topic from Code Commute. And so I try to make a lot of software engineering content as much as I can in my free time. And so Code Commute is my one sort of personal brand where I try to do Q&A style vlog entries, answering people's software engineering questions, stuff like that. And then what I do is I try to look at the week's worth of videos, see whatever had the most views or the most sort of engagement based on people asking questions and stuff. And then I go write a newsletter article about that. And so that's at weekly.devleader.ca. And I always remind folks, like, it is an email newsletter, but if you don't want email, totally cool. Don't subscribe. If you just want to check out kind of what the content for the live stream is going to be, if you go to weekly.devleader.ca, you can see it kind of like a blog post, totally free. I paywall them after roughly a month or so. So if you want to go check out the over 100, I think this was issue 110. Yes, 110. So if you want to check out the other 100 issues, they're all archived. There is a monthly fee for that. It's pretty low. But again, literally no pressure. If you just want to come to the live stream and see the topic, then I'm happy to have you here. So these live streams are very much an AMA format. So I have a topic. We're going to be talking about this this sort of Reddit post that got me to do the Code Commute episode, which got me to do the newsletter article. And it's really about junior developers and sort of this takeaway that, you know, there's work to be done from the more senior people on the team to help empower junior developers to help them learn, to navigate, you know, if they're early in career, understanding like how to work in teams. So there's a whole lot going on. Just got to turn off my phone so I don't see my work notifications. And so I thought that this was an important topic, and I think the response was pretty overwhelming from Code Commute. For context, this had, I probably have it on my screen somewhere. It had like something like, 16x the normal views, which is cool. I think people really responded to it. I honestly think that some people interpreted the title as clickbait because I'm basing it off the Reddit post. So I think people saw the title and they're like, I'm a junior developer. There was even someone who commented and they were like, I haven't even watched this video, but here's my opinion. I'm like, dude, you can't have an opinion yet if you haven't even watched the video. I'm on your side. So anyway, I was, interested in talking about it. And I think that there's some common lessons with this kind of stuff. So again, please use the chat. You can't see my setup from my side, but I got 3 monitors. I got the stream coming in and I got chat all over the place. So if you have questions you want to ask about software engineering, career development, that kind of stuff, please just feel free to ask in the chat. I will, wrap up my thought and go to your question, and I'm happy to try and answer. But with that said, let's talk about junior developers in the workplace and how we can do something to try and help them. So the context for what this person originally wrote about was that they are on a team and they have some junior developers. And what they started to notice is that it feels like the pull requests and the code reviews are kind of getting bogged down. And the way that they wrote their post originally, I suppose, had some people triggered a little bit. I think rightfully so. There's a lot of people that are on edge as software developers right now. And so they had said something along the lines of like, hey, like, really like the juniors that I'm working with, like, they're awesome and stuff. But it seems like we're kind of grinding to a halt with our code reviews, and like, they don't seem to really understand the code I'm writing. So apparently, like, I'm assuming all of the, original comments that were coming in were people being like, well, dude, it's because your code's too complicated and like, maybe you should write better code. And this person had to go back and edit their post to be like, no, like, hold up. not what I'm saying. Like, what I'm saying is I think that these junior developers don't actually have some experience in some of these areas. And as a result, I'm not sure how to like help them because I'm trying different things and it's not really working. So that's the framing for this. And I wanted to bring that up because depending on, your work environment, you might be a more senior developer encountering something like this. And you might be the more junior developer in this case being like, I don't know, you put me on this code review and I don't really know how to help. And so that's the framing. I think with that said, we can kind of dive into some of the thoughts here. But the first thing I wrote about was like, just like not having exposure to some of these areas. And I think it's really easy for a lot of us to forget this kind of thing, especially if we've been in the industry for a long time, or maybe you were someone that as a junior developer, like in your unique journey, maybe you did go learn a whole bunch of different stuff and different tech stacks and whatever. Like I think I can't remember the math on this, but like I think so I started not like super early, but I've always like, really been into computers. Started programming I think in grade 9, so I would have been 14, and by the time I landed my first full-time job, I'd already, been coding for what high school and university, 9 years. And I like to program, so I was programming basically every day, right? Like in and out of like my 6 internships and stuff. So like I had done a bunch of stuff before getting my first full-time job. But that's like certainly not going to be the case for some people. And like what is normal? I don't really know, but I think that it's very easy for a lot of us to get in our own minds like, well, whatever I did must be normal, or I came into the workforce knowing all these things, or this particular tech stack or whatever. And like the reality is that that's not really the case, right? Like you can't really know that about everyone that you're working with. I've talked about this before on different videos, but like, at Microsoft, one of our programming languages that we have is C sharp. And I can't remember, I did the math on this before, but in the 2 teams that I've managed at Microsoft, for the employees that were hired on, sort of like with me or right after me, I think it was like 2 people that knew C sharp and had worked in C sharp in some type of professional capacity before. So like, they don't know C sharp. That's fine, right? But like, if I went into that being like, my expectation is that you all know this, and like, if you don't, like, you're the ones holding us back, it's kind of misaligned. So I think one of the important things to remember here is that when you have new folks coming on, whatever their experience was before, it's going to look different for everyone. And you would hope, of course, that there's some baseline of like some technical ability, of course, some problem solving skills, like things like that. But in terms of the tech stack, in terms of the languages, people are going to be coming from different sort of walks of experience. So in this particular case for this original Reddit post, I think this person was saying, I think they're working in React. He was kind of calling out like, I don't think these more junior people like actually understand some of like the underlying JavaScript stuff that I'm writing that's not just part of React based on whatever they're building. So he's like, I go write this stuff, and because it's not like straight up just, some stuff that's like right in React, they're like, I don't know what you're doing. Right? So already, like, and obviously the React is like TypeScript and JavaScript. So like it's not like it's completely different. It's just that they have this framework sitting on top of it. And when you pull that apart, some of these individuals just weren't getting it. Okay, so I think we have different technology backgrounds that can come up. I think that I've seemed to notice that some individuals, and again, I'm not pointing fingers or blaming anyone, whatever, it's just different experiences. But I've noticed that some individuals kind of like, especially when you want to debug things and like understand how code is actually being put together, some people have difficulty like rationalizing like call stacks and like how, some more abstract systems kind of come together. Because if it's not like within the function and they're kind of just like looking at it line by line there, sometimes like when you start expanding the scope of that, it seems to fall apart pretty quick. But okay, like they're junior, right? Like if they don't have a lot of experience doing this ahead of time, like I don't know, the first programs I was writing, I like, I remember like half bragging to my teacher in high school. I was like, this program I wrote is 10,000 lines long. And I remember like him kind of like trying to hold it in like, dude, like, you don't even know what's going on. And I remember being like, yeah, this is cool. Like 10,000 lines of code. Like, that's crazy. Yeah, because it was all copy pasted if statements. I wasn't really writing functions. So, like, if I'm thinking about myself as a junior developer, there was so much for me to learn. So, the whole point of this section that I wrote in the newsletter, and one of the things I wanted to call out first, is really like having a little bit of empathy and understanding that people are coming from different backgrounds, right? Your background, your experience when you were junior might have been, one way, but that's not the same for everyone else. Mac, is that you from high school on Instagram? I don't know. I don't think I know any other Mac Hiltons. But Mac is on Instagram. You can't see it in the chat, but Mac says, we see that a lot in our business. We use less common languages, 4GL from Postgres. Sure is, buddy. Awesome. Good to see you, man. We use less common language, 4GL from Postgres software, or Progress software, sorry. Postgres. You see what's... 4GL from Progress software. We almost always have to find developers and teach them the language. Awesome, right? So, like, again... Max talking about being, and thank you so much for joining, dude, and that comment. That's awesome. But he's talking about they're already getting developers in. I'm talking about React and JavaScript, and it's like I don't have stats on that, but I'm pretty sure literally every single person who's going into being a software developer right now, that's exactly what they're learning. And so Max talking about this situation where it's not even a common language. You don't even have a choice but to expect to teach people that when they're coming on board. Right. But sometimes we forget about this kind of stuff. And I think that it's, I wanted this to be a reminder near the beginning of this topic to be like, look, we didn't all have the same background and stuff. Right. I think like when I was going through university, I can remember like some of the courses in the beginning. I'm like, why do we go through this? Like, I'm here for computer engineering. Why am I taking some of these math classes, these physics, these chemistry classes? I'm like, just like, can we get to the cool like computer stuff? And really, like in hindsight, it's like they're setting a baseline of expectations to get everyone on the same page so we can move forward. And I think that you kind of have to think about the juniors on your team in a similar capacity. Okay, so that was the first part. For folks that are like, where is this going and what's the takeaway? I like kind of trying to put the meta point out there near the beginning too. So if you're like, hey, this is cool and all, but like get to the point, Nick, and stop rambling. The whole live stream's a ramble. It's a live stream. So the meta point that I'll be talking about is something that comes up in other topics as well. And that's really that this is kind of difficult for some people, but like, unfortunately, I think in these cases, you need to slow down to speed up. And what I mean by that is if this person's already like, hey man, like our pull requests, like they're taking too long and like I have to figure out a way to help the juniors and like it's kind of slowing things down. Like, hate to break it to you, but to make this better, you probably got to slow down even more, at least for a little bit. And the idea behind this is going to be that if you're sort of not trying to avoid the problems, but actually address the problems, or in this case, you're looking to, implement solutions to some of the challenges that you're experiencing, then those things will pay dividends long term. So slow down. It's a little bit more costly up front, and then long term it makes things better. So that's the meta point, just as a heads up. So if you're like, that sounds boring, well, thank you so much for joining. And if that sounds interesting, then stick around. So the next part that I'm going to talk about is taking some opportunity to pair up. And this is part of being able to slow down, because I think when I was trying to talk about this on the Code Commute vlog, the thing that I was kind of hinting at was like, I think some people try to avoid like whatever they're perceiving is the thing that slows them down. So to give you an example, this whole talk is about, a Reddit post that someone made where they said, hey, I'm putting these junior developers on these pull requests and like, it's not going so well. They're slowing me down. What if you had this brilliant idea where you said, hey, look, if the junior developers slow me down, what if I stop putting the junior developers onto the pull requests? What if I just get rid of that problem, right? Take the juniors. Thanks. You go do your junior stuff. I'm going to go put the senior people onto my pull request. I don't need you juniors to look at this, right? So what happens when you start avoiding problems, right? We'll get into that in a little bit. So this is the exact opposite strategy. It's not avoiding the problems. It's actually literally going to address where you're having challenges. So pairing up for folks that have not done a little bit of pair programming or haven't done mentoring before, I think that there's an opportunity on your code reviews to introduce a little bit of this. Doesn't have to be super heavy-handed. You don't have to do it with all of the juniors all at once. You can if you want. You can do a mix and match where, like, you know, if I'm just making this up, if you have a handful of juniors on your team, maybe for your one pull request, you pull on Billy and you say, Billy, we're gonna get on a call. We're gonna go through this PR together. I'm gonna talk you through it, let you kind of see what's up, let you ask questions and stuff. Right. And then maybe the next time you go to Sally and you do the same thing, or maybe you get Billy and Sally onto the same call, kind of two birds with one stone. There's a more positive way to say that. And I never remember it, but we're not killing birds with stones. So you can address that more in volume, right? So you can kind of mix and match this however you want. But the idea is that instead of just adding the junior developers onto the code review and being like, okay, go do the review thing, obviously. It's really about kind of setting them up for success and inviting them to be curious and ask questions. So I think there's a lot of interesting things that can come out of this, and it's really not that big of a lift. So you could spend, what did I even write here? Like, did I even write a time? Like, you could do like 15 to 30 minutes, right? If you think about it, depending on the questions you're getting left on your pull request, maybe you're spending more time trying to think about like thoughtful ways to answer stuff. So spend a little bit of time up front, walk people through some of the pull request, explain what's going on, and then give them this opportunity to like let you know what they're thinking. I don't know the better way to say that, but kind of like, if you probably have tried this yourself where someone's explaining something to you and you go, okay, in my own words, are you saying blah, blah, blah? And then you're kind of letting the person know you're listening and your interpretation of what's going on. Give those junior developers that same opportunity, right? So you're walking through some things and then say, hey, like, based on your understanding, like, can you tell me what this code's doing? Right? And if they're getting stuck or they have questions, it's a really good opportunity to be like, cool, like, let's talk about that then. It might be that maybe it's a little overwhelming at first. Maybe they need some extra time to go read through and leave comments. But again, that's another opportunity for you to say to them, like, hey, cool, like, now that we've spent like 15 to 30 minutes on this, like, now you know sort of the main areas that I'm touching and my rationale for doing that and high level what I'm trying to accomplish. If you have any other questions, right, either you can ping me on the side in chat. If you're open to it, you could have another call with them. Or you can say, just leave comments on the review. And then one of the other really cool things about that is you're inviting them to ask questions, and you can let them know, because this is you have to find the right words to do this in your own words and phrasing, but inviting people to ask questions and like share things is such a good way to like let them know that other people will also have questions. It's almost like a chain reaction. And you might have seen this depending on, different experiences you've had, like if you've done like icebreaker type things, or if you've ever tried to lead a small group of people in a conversation, no one's speaking up or whatever. As soon as you break the ice a little bit, then it's like, hey, like, oh, it's not so bad. I can ask questions. So I would recommend like invite people into, asking questions when it's in a when it's on a pull request. Then you can have someone ask questions. You can answer it right there, right? Other people can read those answers. And that way it's an opportunity to help educate other people on the team. So a couple questions in chat across platforms. So I'm going to shut my mouth for 1 sec. I'm going to Mac on Instagram again. And by the way, I do see Akib and Tarzan is live. I see your questions on YouTube. I'm just going to pause to do Max and then I'll come back over. So Max says, how do you manage training junior devs when one of the measurements your team is measured on billable utilization. Yeah, I see that as a common situation where problem avoidance comes up. Yeah, and I think this is like, I think the reality is, Mac, I don't know the situation for like how your work is structured, but this is something that I would want to bring up with the manager or whoever is kind of coordinating these things, because when it comes, and I, full disclosure, I've not actually worked in an environment where we have to do like billable hours and stuff like that. But I would say that if that's a consideration, it needs to come into like the decision making process for whoever's managing those interactions. So just as an example, I like to exaggerate things on different sides of a spectrum to kind of paint a picture. But if you had, you know, so Mac, let's say you're the senior developer and they're like, okay, well, we're going to put 6 junior developers with Mac. Mac's the only person who knows this stuff. And then we're going to bill the client like crazy because we got these developers on there. It's going to be great. And then you're like, cool, except I have to spend all of my time as probably the only productive person that knows the tech stack, or Mac was saying a language, like I have to spend all of my time teaching them. Like there's a ramp curve. They're not going to get anything done in the first X days or weeks. And like, who is that going to fall on? So the reality is like that shouldn't fall on Mac, and it shouldn't fall on the other developers. That's not really fair. So I think that this is something that you would want to discuss with the manager to be like, hey, look, like I say the manager here because I don't know what the structure is like, but I think that needs to be a factor. And probably what makes more sense in some capacity is like you have more tenured people mixed in with some like juniors. So you might have like, you know, someone who's really high level or a senior or a couple seniors, some mid levels, and a couple juniors. And you, in my opinion, always want to have sort of this staggered like experience level situation so that there's always some more junior people to ramp up and teach and always some people who can really hit the ground running. And you mix these things in so that you can kind of spread out the amount of, I don't want to say like hand-holding is such like a, feel like a condescending thing to say. You can spread out the amount of like coaching and mentoring for the really junior people that they're just not going to be effective right away. So Mac, I think my number one suggestion here would be like having that conversation for whoever is the decision maker for getting things built out and stuff, to be like, look, if we need to have junior developers, and you probably should in some capacity, like how much time needs to be spent, making that really clear. If they're pushing back and being like, you know, there is no time for it, like I just feel like that's not a good setup, and I don't know how much decision making or influence you have on that, but I don't know if that helps, but that's kind of how I would push back on that thing, is just to give some visibility into the amount of time and effort that goes into training people like that. But let me know. I'm going to jump to the other questions, and if you're like, Nick, that made literally no sense or you completely missed it, just try again and I will try my best to answer. Akib says, what do you think about vibe coding? I feel like it's ruining junior devs. In what sense? In what sense do you feel like it's ruining junior devs? Do you mean people vibe coding ruins the need for junior devs, or do you mean that juniors vibe coding is ruining juniors? I'd be curious to know which way you think about that, because that will help me try and clarify how I want to focus on answering that. So Akib, I don't know if you have any follow-up to that. I'm going to jump to Tarzan is live. Their question, because if you have a little bit more context you want to provide, that will help me try and answer. But Tarzan is live says, in college right now, I applied to many jobs, no success. Any suggestions? This is a really difficult one to answer because it's very generic and I can't really know all the details. So the thing that I like to remind people for applying to jobs is that the job application part of, you know, getting into software development is basically like, you need to find ways to stand out. And you're probably like, thanks, Nick. That's the most obvious advice I've literally ever heard. And then I would say, okay, but how are you standing out? Because if I were to totally guess at the different sort of, you know, skills and experiences that are showing up on a resume, it's probably something like React, TypeScript, JavaScript, maybe some type of database, maybe Python instead of those other languages I mentioned. And then for side projects, either one side project or none. And then going, it's really hard to go, you know, like no one's saying yes to me. And like, I'm not saying this in a way to try and be rude or condescending, not my intention at all. My point is that, you know, this part of the job search is like standing out. And it's really, really, really difficult to stand out when so many people that are kind of entering the workforce or trying to, right? Like, are all coming in with a very similar set of skills. So like, how do you stand out? What are ways that you can do that? So some thoughts, right? And like, you know, I've had people tell me the number of jobs that they're applying to, and I'm like, I don't even know how that's physically possible. On the order of like 80 to 100 a week. I'm like, good for you. I have no idea physically how you can do that, but okay. So there's people that are taking the volume game. The feedback I've heard on that too is that it lets you have a little bit more signal for trying out different things on your resume. But again, that's a lot of volume. So you have volume of resumes for your job application. You have things where you can be like networking. Networking is a very slow thing. I think a lot of people miss this. Networking is extremely slow, but networking is very, very helpful. It needs to be done intentionally. And in my opinion, you want to approach this in a way that's not like, who can I contact to extract value from? Right? To give you an example, I'm just going to use myself because I'm the one talking and no one else has a microphone right now. But if you were like, okay, there's this bald guy on the internet and he's live streaming. So like he's saying to network what I should do, because I bet you this guy works somewhere. And I bet you if I reach out to him and I'm like, hey, give me a referral, I can get the job referral from this bald guy. Right? Like if your thought process is immediately, how can I find someone to extract the value to get the job? I think like you are missing networking. Networking is slow, but networking increases your surface area for luck. But I think to effectively network, it needs to be intentional, it needs to take time, and it needs to be approached, in my opinion, in a way that is not supposed to be like, how do I extract value from people? To explain more what I mean about that is like, I have lots of people that will reach out on LinkedIn. The one message that they send is like, hi, so-and-so, I don't even know if they know my name. Here's my resume. I'm interested in applying for some position that like doesn't, I don't even know where that's coming from. I don't know if it exists. Like, interested in this position. Here's my resume. Can you refer me? Like, I don't know who you are. And pardon me, but like, I have so much other stuff to do. So like, no, the answer is just no. But there are people that show up repeatedly. Thanks, Matt. Good to see you. Thanks for dropping in. Yeah, I hope you're doing well too, man. It's it's really cool to run into you on the internet. So thanks for being here. Yeah, like it's just, it's not intentional. And I was just saying, I have people that show up repeatedly and they've never asked me for anything ever. And like, those are the people, they seem genuinely interested. They're trying to, you know, form like a, I don't know, like almost like, it almost feels like a friendship. And like, cool, but I get to learn more about them. Right? I learn tons about them because they're just showing up and interacting, right? I'll give you an example. Jonathan Barron's been on this stream. He's putting messages in the chat right now. And he's saying, I can't attend, so I don't even know if Jonathan can hear me, but I know Jonathan shows up a lot. There's Devin who shows up a lot too. Devin comments on almost every single Code Commute video I have. Devin's never asked me for anything, but I've learned lots about Devin. Devin Goebel, I don't think he's on here right now. He's missing his streak. But there are lots of these people who have, you know, they've been in touch. They're networking, right? And they've never asked for anything. Right? There was a recent example, and because Jonathan's mentioning commit your code, I just want to explain with a very simple example. Sorry, Tarzan is live. I realize this is like the longest winded answer for your question. that's conceivable. But I just want to keep rambling a bit. So Commit Your Code is a conference I'm going to speak to in Dallas later this week. I have a small speaking slot, but it's really cool. I'm not a public speaker, but I get to try it out. So I had originally gone to Dallas before, and this is hosted by Danny Thompson. And Danny was hosting a meetup, and I went to speak there. Okay, so I, got to meet the people that attended. There was someone who had, that I met at that conference. We were talking on LinkedIn. We did, good opportunity for a podcast interview to hear about how they're navigating getting into the tech space. Did a podcast interview. That's a cool networking opportunity. I mean, for me, I get to have a podcast guest. That's awesome. And I think for that person, I'm assuming they're probably like, this is pretty cool. And you know what happened? Someone who works at a company saw that podcast interview and they said, wow, that person's so good at focusing on communication with software developers. They reached out to them and offered them a job. I think they had to interview for it, but they offered them a job interview and that person got that job. So is that guaranteed? No. I'm not saying that anyone who sends me a message automatically, you're getting a job from somewhere. It just created the surface area for these opportunities. Okay. And that all started from someone who never asked anything from me. And I think that that's my biggest recommendation is to start networking, start trying to form connections with people genuinely, and do that over time. It's slow, but it creates a surface area for these opportunities. Sorry, and Akib, I don't know if I ever got to answering your question, but I'll try to answer the vibe coding thing. Is vibe coding just ruining junior devs? I don't think vibe coding is ruining junior devs necessarily, but I'm going to take this approach as in junior devs are ruining themselves with vibe coding, I think is maybe what the question is. I think some are. And I think it's just coming from a space of not really understanding, and that's okay. Because I think that there's a course correction that can happen. I realize my camera's aimed too low. If I'm sitting in my chair, it's supposed to be like this. But that's not gonna, I have to slink into my chair to get on the stream here. I should have prepared this better. So I think with vibe coding, what ends up happening is that there's a bit of misconception. And so I think there's some things that we haven't realized about vibe coding yet, and we won't have data on this for years, I'm sure. I'm very curious to see if people that get into vibe coding and they're like, I only know how to vibe code. I don't even know what I'm doing, but I'm making stuff. I am super curious to see, and I mean this genuinely, if long-term that ends up being a more effective way to build software. And I realize it sounds ridiculous, but I'm curious to see if that's the case. I don't believe it, but I'm keeping my mind open to it because I'm very curious to see if the way that tools evolve, that you can just do that. You can kind of ride this wave of being I don't actually really need to know, and I can get by, and then the tools get better over time, and you're so used to working with with these AI tools. Okay, and Akib, I see there's a bit of a delay in the chat, sorry, but no worries, and that makes sense. Make use of AI specifically to complete projects. And I think it can be crippling, but this is, I think what happens is that people, it's not a dumb question. I think it's a very good question. I think what can happen is that people misunderstand what the goal is. And I've talked about this many times on Code Commute and at least a couple times on this stream, but I think people misunderstand the goal. So what do I mean by that? Well, we had this question from Tarzan is Live about, applying to jobs and that kind of stuff. And what's one way to stand out? Someone might answer, well, you need a portfolio, right? You need a portfolio so you can stand out, which isn't bad advice, not bad advice at all. But then what happens is that someone hears that and they go, okay, I need a portfolio. Well, I'm starting from zero. How do I get from zero to portfolio of awesome things? Okay, well, like any human who's looking for the path of least resistance, if I need to go from zero to portfolio of awesome things, hey ChatGPT, hey Cursor, hey Copilot, hey Claude, hey whatever else, you open up 10 windows and 15 terminals and you type a prompt into each one and you say, go build me the thing. I need my portfolio. I need it so I can stand out for my job, right? And then you have all these AI tools go whip up the most random stuff. You're like, cool. And you press play on it, it runs. You have a little website. Great. Take some screenshots, push it up to GitHub with all of your secrets. And I'm just kidding. Don't do that. And then so you have these results and you go, yes, I have the portfolio. But there was something that was missing. And that is, you know, the goal of the portfolio was not like, can you have all of these fancy projects? In my opinion, and this is just my own opinion, I think the goal of the portfolio is to show people that you are learning different things. Right? You don't have the professional work experience, you're just getting started. It makes sense you don't have the professional work experience. That's basically impossible if you haven't worked. So, right? So how do you get experience? Well, if you go doing side projects, you go do side projects, go try to build things. You create your own experience. It might not be professional work experience, but you can say, look, I wanted to learn Android development. Okay, so I started building an Android app and I needed to store data in a database. But that means that I also needed to have a server to go store stuff on. And like, I don't know, I need to make sure that I can have updates to the server that's running. So I had to figure out cloud deployment. So suddenly you start building these things and you're piecing these things together and you like basically don't have a choice to go learning about them. But if all you do is go to your favorite LLM and you say, go build me it, you won't learn. And I think that's maybe when Akib is asking if it's crippling, like, or dangerous, like, I think that's the dangerous part. It's misunderstanding what the goal is. For myself, right, like there's things that I build now. I've been programming for over 20 years. There's absolutely stuff where I'm like, give me the shortcut. Give me the shortcut. I don't need to go spend time learning that. Why? Because like I know it's a one-off thing. Like do it as fast as you can. Or there's things where I'm like, I know I'm not deploying this. I need a little proof of concept to see something working to see if I even want to go down that path. Build me the fastest, crappiest thing you possibly can that just shows me the concept works. Great. Or there's things I know that I can have AI go refactor some code or do some small UI changes or whatever else. And it's mostly vibe coded. And I go, that's fine. I can review the code. I know what I'm looking for. I've been doing this for a long time. But my goals are different. Right? Like my goals are very different. Like what I would not be doing, even with AI tools, is I'm not going to say I wanted to leave Microsoft and I'm like, I haven't been programming at work for the last 5 years. I should have some projects to show. And I got to catch up on those 5 years of not having projects. So let me go use AI to go build stuff. Like it's the wrong answer. I need to show that I'm learning about these different technologies, and really blasting some AI stuff out I don't think helps unless you are trying to prove that you know how to use AI tools, which could be interesting too. So I don't think that's a dumb question at all. I hope that perspective helps. I have to block this kick person for spamming my chat. And then Jabwan was saying, Jabwan, I don't know how to pronounce your name. I'm so sorry. No dumb questions. Don't take it like that if you don't know. Yeah. Akib, you were also saying, can 2 years of internship experience in Unix administration help with getting an SE job? Yeah, so if you're not familiar, I have another YouTube channel called Dev Leader Path to Tech. And on that channel, I do resume reviews. And one of the things I always say in resume reviews is if you have non-developer experience, you can absolutely lean into some of that experience and call out different things you were doing, because there's a lot of experience that's not programming that you could gain from other jobs, other roles, that could be very applicable for working in teams as a software developer. As a Unix administrator, I think that you have some technical things that will overlap, but I'm assuming from that internship, there's probably even some non-technical things. Like, did you have projects you worked on? Did you have to work in teams? What did that look like? Did you were an intern, but did you ever have to mentor other people, like other new interns? Like, going through some of those experiences and calling that on a resume could be very helpful. I can't pronounce your name on Instagram. I'm so sorry. KXCI61. So sorry. There's probably two names or something in there. Hello. Good to see you. Thanks for joining the stream. I also saw a comment on networking. Definitely. This is from Jabwan. Definitely slow. I finally got 2 tech lead referrals after 3 years of being in my job. Or that's for the just the market, I guess, or maybe that was networking related. But yeah, things are slow. But I just wouldn't give up. Right? Like, the thing is, when things are challenging, if you just go, well, then no. I mean, there's going to be other people that go, well, yes, and then they stick around and then they keep trying to make progress towards their goals. So I would encourage, one of the reasons I try to make content, and I mean this genuinely, one of the reasons I try to make content is that I don't want people to give up on stuff, because I have loved being in software development. I literally cannot imagine doing another career. I'm very fortunate, and I'm glad that I got into things when I was younger, and I'm glad that I found that out for myself when I was younger, that I really liked to do it. So that's great. But because I have gone through and been in the industry, I want that for other people that are interested. And it makes me so sad to see people that are oh, I don't think I could do that because I'm not smart enough, or I'm not good at math, or now it's well, it's too competitive. And it's I mean it for anyone. If you're interested, please just, don't give up on it. Please don't. I mean, I'm not here to say if you literally need a job to afford food and keep a roof over your head, please don't take my advice as well, Nick said don't give up, so I can't do anything else. No, you need to take care of yourself, but don't give up on the goal that you're looking for. That's one of the reasons I make all the content I do, is just to give you as many perspectives and different experiences as I can, so that you see what things are like in software development. Cool. And so, Akib, I'm glad. I hope that helps. So thanks for your question. I think it's a good one. Jabwan says, I'm turning into a mid-level next month. I am learning more about systems as much as I can. What was your transition, if you can get into that here? Let's see. So, okay. So for myself, when I was, my career is really weird, because I became a manager really soon in my career, really early. And that's just out of necessity at a startup. But the other thing that's a little bit unique too, especially compared to now, is there's a lot of web development and a lot of people deploying systems, a lot of web services and systems at scale. I didn't have that. We were building desktop applications. So the first 8 years of my career after my internships were building desktop applications. And it's kind of funny because, like I said, I had been programming. By the time I had my first job, I've been programming for 9 years. After my internships, I mean. So 9 years. So from 9 years into 17 years in of coding was almost all building desktop applications. It's a lot of desktop applications. So what that looks like for me will probably look kind of different when I go to answer this. But I think for me, when I think systems, right? Systems for me were not about, they weren't about how do I scale systems horizontally? How do I deploy things in the cloud and horizontally scale and deal with all this traffic? That's not a question I had to answer, but something that I think that I needed to start kind of seeding in my brain early, kind of going from junior to more mid-level, was and you kind of get, at least for me, this feedback kind of happened really quickly at a startup. But we started to see I can say, at least for myself, you're like trying to deliver all this code, right? Like we're at a startup every day. It's like something new. We got to get these features delivered. It's really awesome experience. But it kind of like, okay, but now I'm trying to do this part and like this thing's falling apart and like, okay, but we keep going. And then like now we're working over here and like, okay, now we can keep progressing. We got to go back to this other thing. And it's like, oh man, like not this code again. So like starting for me, it was really starting to realize like a couple things. Like one, that there are some things like it's going to sound cliche because I already talked about this in a different context, but like some things we like literally need to slow down a little bit on so that we can build in resiliency. So things like different types of tests to have in place. I went through school. We never learned about testing at all somehow. Like that's not important at all, but like, yeah, okay, we got to have tests in place. Okay, well, now that we're coming back to touch this code, like, okay, like I feel like now that I'm touching it again, I feel like this is the worst code I've ever seen. And like, I wrote it and I wrote it like 2 months ago. Like, why the heck did I write it so poorly? And I think that I started to realize like, not that I had a good solution for this, but we have to do something better so that every time we want to go touch code again, we don't feel like we need to rewrite it. So there was like starting to see this like idea around like, what does it look like to not need to try and rewrite code every time you go to touch it? Because I don't think I really understood that. It was pretty apparent in my own personal projects too. I'd work on something, take a break from it, maybe for a year or whatever, come back, and I'd be like, this is a cool idea, but like, I cannot work in this code. I was never designing stuff or writing code in a way that you could do that. Right? Like, and starting to realize like, hey, there's all these patterns and stuff we can apply, but I'm not applying any of them in a way that I would think is effective. So for me, like that mid-level kind of time frame was like pattern recognition and like going, like I don't really have solutions for these things, but like I'm starting to see like patterns emerging, like code I write's terrible very shortly after. Hey, when we have some tests in places that seems to actually help us, how do we get better at doing that? I don't know. All sorts of things like this, I think were kind of my experience going to mid-level. I don't know if that helps, but that's kind of what mine looked like. And yeah, the weird thing was like I was also managing people at that time too. So should I have been? Probably not. But I was, so unique experience. Cool. I don't think there's any other questions. I'm going to go back to the article. We got about 15 minutes left. Or sorry, in Canadian, that's about 15 minutes left. I'm Canadian. I'm allowed to say that. So I talked last on this article about pairing up and like making some space to kind of walk through, some of the pull requests, giving people the opportunity to ask questions and kind of invite them, right? I think the next thing related to that is like, I think sometimes more junior people get stuck, especially on code reviews, because you're like, hey, putting you on this review. And they're like, okay, like, what do you want me to do with this? Right? Like what's actually expected here? And sometimes, like, especially being more junior, you may not actually have the experience to be able to offer feedback yet. And I don't mean that in like a condescending way or anything. You may be looking at this code that someone's put up and you're like, I just don't know what feedback I would give here. Maybe with more experience or more exposure to different patterns and things like that, you'd start to be able to do that. That's fine. That'll come with experience. But otherwise, you're kind of like, thanks for adding me. Like, I guess looks good to me. I'll just approve it. And I think that one of the missed opportunities here is asking questions. So one of the things that asking questions can start to uncover is like, this is going to sound weird. I don't really know a good way to explain this, but I'm going to try. Is like, instead of going on to a pull request or a code review and then just reading the code and like trying to tell someone like, you're doing this wrong or change this, right? And you probably have experienced this at some point in your careers, right? Or if you're not working yet, like, if someone's reviewing your code in any context, you're getting comments that are like, change this or don't use this pattern or whatever. Like, the other thing that can come up that's actually I feel like is more helpful is actually when people ask questions about things. They get you thinking. And that's almost like immediate value that you can start to add onto people's code reviews and pull requests. But you can ask questions for you to learn, right? So if you're a more junior person, you're like, I don't know what this code does. Again, I think create the place and the space for people to go ask that kind of stuff and feel comfortable, right? That helps the juniors learn. But juniors can actually help the other people with their code reviews, not by saying, like line 37, don't use that pattern. Like they won't know, or maybe they do, but maybe not that common. Instead, like you could be asking questions about what the code does. Right. So I wrote down in the newsletter article a handful of different examples of just like different things that you could be trying to think about. You don't have to know the answer. You're the one asking the questions. So like, for example, you see a code change somewhere, right? So someone's changing code and you happen to notice that none of the test files were touched. Okay. Right. This is a pattern that we can pick up on. It doesn't mean that that's the wrong thing to do. Right? Maybe they made a code change because someone could commit a code and the test was broken. So they're actually going to make the change and the test should pass now. I don't know. But it's not like a rule, but you could say if you notice a situation like that, I happen to notice, like, can we talk about, or can you describe to me like the code coverage for this, or what does code coverage look like? Or do we have a test for this? Right, like I said in the newsletter article, I wrote out a bunch of different examples. You can take that list, you can come up with your own, whatever. The whole idea is that giving some junior developers some things to go feel like they can ask and explore. What's interesting is like they may go try to find those answers themselves. Right, so that example I just gave about tests, right? One of the things that you might want to consider when you're looking at a pull request is like, is there some test coverage on this change? Right? Do you know how to find the answer to that? You might, right? So you might go and look at the pull request and go, okay, I see like touch these 3 classes. And like, okay, well, I do see that there were some test files changed. Let me go read that. And like, okay, one of these test files is for one of those classes. Awesome. And then like, you don't see there's no other test files touched. Does that mean that there's no coverage on that code change? No. Right? It might be some type of functional or integration test and only the one test file had to get changed and we get the right coverage over the scenario. Like there's a million different things that could happen here, but the point is it gets you thinking. And one of the goals with all of this entire topic is about trying to expose some of the junior developers to things where they can learn and grow. These are all things that aren't going to be like, boom, immediate, like juniors are, all-time high productivity. It's going to take time. So give them some tools to work with so that they can practice and learn. I think this is like another sort of generic thing, but you can apply this as well. Time boxing, I think, is super important. So, if you're setting juniors up to go helping, like looking at code reviews or anything else, like set some type of expectation for them. Say, hey, look, like goal is like, I want to have this reviewed by the end of the day tomorrow. So like you kind of have like half of today and like the full day tomorrow, but like, I don't want you to like feel like you don't know what you're doing the entire time and then like not ask questions and like get nothing done. So like, let's time box this so you have some opportunity to ask, if you haven't responded to me, I'm just making this up, by like, tomorrow morning or something, then like I'll reach out, I'll check in with you. But kind of time boxing and setting some expectations, I think, can be tremendously helpful. I know for myself, I shy away from this a lot because I don't like, sometimes I feel like it's micromanagey. And for me, that's a huge, like, cannot stand doing that. But I have learned a lot from junior developers that setting little milestones like that can actually be extremely helpful because it makes the expectations more clear. Right. And if you were to go send, like, this is a thing for problem solving, letting junior folks get a little bit more stuck and letting them think through things and try to like be resourceful and figure things out, that can work really, really well. Just time box it, right? Because if you're like, okay, it's been a day, it's been a week, like, what did you leave them stuck on for a full week that they couldn't get done? Like, that's too much, but maybe, stuck for 15 minutes is too short. So like working with them to find a sweet spot where they can try learning, getting stuck, and then you kind of help them after. I see a message in the chat. Should someone who comes from legacy ASP.NET web forms learn MVC or Blazor? There's sort of like, I don't know. I think Blazor's if you're building, what's a good way to answer this? I think depending on what you're building, right? So like, if I were building front ends in .NET, I would just go Blazor personally. But I think it's like, they're just different technologies to play with. For me, like I build ASP.NET Core backends. I have some more like internal tools and stuff like that are Blazor. My blog's in Blazor. So like, just give me one sec. Just so people know it's like, it's a real thing. Because everyone's like, oh, Blazor, you can't use Blazor for production things. Is that coming through on the stream? I think the answer is yes. So like this website, I mean, it's nothing fancy, but this isn't Blazor, right? So if you wanted to go read my blog posts, right? This is one of the newsletters I put out every week that's just like snapshots of stuff, and then like my actual newsletter article that I'm talking through right now. All right, like this is a Blazor site. So like it's all, you can totally use it to build, real things. They don't just have to be internal apps. I find that right now, like especially if I'm building stuff in smaller teams, like outside of work at least, because I don't do any UI development or anything at work, we might, like I would go straight to a C# backend and then like probably some type of React based front end personally, just because the I don't know, like the support, the community just feels like obviously more mature for JavaScript front ends. But if I wasn't building in a team and it was just me, Blazor, like 100%. And not because, and I'm saying this with complete honesty, not because I think Blazor is better than everything else. Blazor is probably the better tool for me because I live and breathe C#. I'm not saying that's a good thing, because if I spent more time in other languages, then I'd probably be even better off with some of those other ones. But I hope that helps. I don't know. Like I don't think there's a right or wrong answer, but that's kind of how I approach things. Carlos, welcome back. How do you deal with pressure as a manager when things are not going well? Example, the team is behind schedule. The team can't work faster and upper management complains. Yep. This is a good question. Mostly panic, and I would remind people that I used to have hair on my head as well, and my beard used to not be white. And then the stress kicked in, all of the hair left, and my beard is white. But in all seriousness, I think a handful of things. One is that, for me personally, number one thing that I try to focus on, at least for my team, is, and I'm going to say this, I'm not saying it's like the right thing, but this is like my sort of philosophy, is like when there's a lot of pressure, I try not to add that pressure onto my team. I have never been in a situation, and I mean this in all honesty, I have never been in a situation, it might just be I've been very lucky, where my team and I were under pressure and like they didn't feel it from someone else other than me. Like if there's pressure coming in, it's not because I'm the one like, you better get to work, we're under a lot of pressure. They're already feeling it from someone else, or sort of like an organizational pressure or some deadline. They already feel the pressure. What they really don't need is me chasing them down, adding more to that pressure. So sort of rule number one for me is like, I might be under a ton of stress, and if I'm feeling a ton of stress, I know that they're feeling a ton of stress. I'm not adding to that, or I will do my very best to not contribute to that. I almost have to play the opposite role, right? Hey, talk to me about what's going on, right? Like, Are you stressed about this? Like, how can I help? Like, I need to make sure that they feel heard and they feel seen, because doing what feels like the opposite of like, okay, well, there's a lot of pressure. Like, I gotta get status updates and move things along. Like, you literally don't help anyone when you're doing that. And so I say this as someone, like, when I was a manager for the first 8 years of my career, I was an IC at the same time. I literally know what it feels like to be in the position where you have someone like chasing you down for updates and you're like, man, what the hell do you want me to do? I'm literally working as hard as I physically can on this. You trying to like chase me down, like micromanage every step I'm doing, is just not contributing in any positive way. So again, my rule number one is trying not to add more stress to the team. I think rule number two for me is I try as best as I can to I guess, I don't know a good way to say this, like almost like shelter the team as much as I can from additional stress. So when I understand the source of that stress, is that another team? Is that my manager, my skip? Is that some part of the organization? I try to understand where that pressure is coming from and do a bit of shielding. Why? Because they already are under pressure. Like, it just, you literally do not help when you add more. They're adults, right? Like, I'm going to be 37 in April. If I know that there's a deadline for something and there's a lot of pressure, you know what I don't need? Someone treating me like I'm not an adult trying to add more pressure. It just feels ridiculous, and it makes me not want to do the work at all. So trying to do a bit of shielding and try not to add more pressure for myself. The other thing is, like, I've worked on some projects that were really stressful and really over a long period of time. I try to make sure that again, I don't know if this is like a good strategy or not, but this is something I try to do, is like, if I'm the person that's leading the team, I want to like make sure that I can stay strong for the team. So what I don't want to do is kind of cave into the pressure and make the whole team that I'm leading think like I'm falling apart too, right? Which means that I need to make sure that I'm in a position where I can listen to the team, I can take on their burdens, and as much as possible, like, not fold under the pressure as well. I need to try and alleviate their pressure. If that means taking on some stress myself, even more, then I will try to do that. That's what I'm saying. I don't know if that's actually a good thing, but that's part of my strategy with this kind of stuff. This is all kind of like internal and like how I navigate as a person, but sort of externally, like things I try to do, like when I say externally, like outside of the team, is when there's pressure, a lot of the time this comes from not understanding visibility, right? For example, there's a deadline coming up. You're feeling a lot of pressure. People keep asking for status updates. They don't have confidence that the date's going to be hit. They don't have clarity. They can't see the details of what's happening. That's why people do this type of reaction where they're like, what's the update? What's the update? I need the status. Cool. Okay. So there's a gap in you understanding visibility and status. What can I do to be proactive about that? How can I give you status? How can I get ahead of that to try and build confidence in you? Furthermore, if there's things that are not on track, like, how can I put my hand up and say, look, this thing over here, we need extra help, right? I'm just making this up, so don't attach this to like my current manager, my current skip. But if my manager came to me and was like, what's the status? What's the status? Or my skip was trying to chase me down, I would be trying to find ways to give them information they need ahead of time. And then I would also be like, hey, look, if this thing's off track, if I need support, my team needs support, I'm letting you know right now, I need help. My team needs help. Because if I don't tell them, that's where we're not going to build trust. That's where something's going to go off the rails. That's where they're going to say in a retrospective, like, why didn't you ask for help? Why didn't you let us know? We could have tried to do something to help, right? So I think communicating a lot, over communicating even, and doing it, you have to kind of level up or sort of regulate your communication of the different levels of stakeholders that you're talking to. But I think, yeah, over communicating is like one sort of proactive thing out of the team that I try to do. And otherwise, My role as a manager is to support my team. So whatever they need, whatever that looks like, that could be very situational for some individuals. Maybe, honestly, maybe some people need to rant about what they're doing. Maybe some people need help coding. Maybe some people are blocked by partners and they're feeling really stressed. Maybe some people are blocked by people internally having conflicting opinions and I need to jump in to help moderate that. Could be anything. So it's really about listening to people on the team, trying to shelter them from additional stress, and then communicating as much as possible. So, Carlos, I hope that helps answer your question. I think that's a good one. I'm certainly can always improve on it for myself, so we'll do my best. But yeah, I'm trying to think if there's anything else I wanted to add from the article. Okay, yeah. To wrap it up, I kind of hinted at this earlier, but this last section I wrote here was really like, if you're avoiding sort of where the challenge is coming from, and this again for folks that have joined a little bit later, talking about junior developers being effective on code reviews. If you say, look, like the juniors are the ones that are slowing things down, therefore if we just avoid putting juniors on this stuff, avoid the problem, you're actually just perpetuating it, and it shows up in different ways. So I put an analogy in the newsletter article where essentially I'm just using on-call as an example. It's really hard to speak. As an example of this, because I've seen this happen across multiple teams. Okay, not one, it's not like it was a coincidence, like not two, but like across multiple teams. And what ends up happening, it's pretty typical, is if you have really experienced people on the team, they're the ones, when there is something that's on fire, right? They are the ones who can most likely fix it the fastest. They have the most history and most tenure on the team. They can debug and troubleshoot stuff really fast. They can come up with the strategies to roll out the fixes fast or to mitigate. Like, they can fight fires really well. Why? Because they've done it a lot. Okay? Now, what happens is that if we perpetuate this, where we say anytime there is a fire, you put the person who can put it out the fastest in charge of putting it out, what ends up happening is that you don't allow the other people on the team to build up that skill set. Furthermore, you take the people who are most experienced, who probably need to spend more time on, I don't know, like higher level work, like architectural design or coordinating with different teams and stuff. You take them away from that work to go fight fires. Kind of both parts of this aren't great. But what you get is the fires put out as fast as possible. But you perpetuate the problem that only the really good firefighters can put out any fire. And the non-firefighters can never put out any fire because they have no experience doing it. So I think that I'm not saying that you never let the more experienced people put out fires, but try to think about having people who don't have experience yet try some of the hit my mic. Try some of the lower risk things. The same thing on like a pull request and a code review, right? Hey, this is something that's like a stepping stone. Let's get through this. It'll help you learn something about it. With the on-call thing, it's like, hey, I could probably go figure out how to, mitigate this, but this is a good thing for you to go investigate, right? Maybe to get someone to go root cause something. So you mitigated it. You put out the fire because you're the senior person. And then you have them go, you guide them through some root cause analysis, like letting them take on some of the things that they're not comfortable doing can be really helpful. This goes back to slow down to speed up. Yes, by having people who aren't experienced go fight the fires, mitigate things, do root cause analysis, yes, it's going to be slower. It's going to be slower because they haven't done it before. It makes sense. But this is the kind of thing that over time, they will get better at doing it. There are more people available that can do it. And that means that over time, you start to reach this point where the more senior people can get back to doing the more senior stuff. You have more people on the team that can put out fires or to jump on code reviews and understand stuff. This is exactly why I strongly believe that you must always try to have a range of different levels on a team. You can't just stack a team full of principal engineers and go, we have the best team ever. It just doesn't work that way, because all of the work that you're doing is not going to be like for the level of a principal engineer. Just the same way that it would not work if you put, only people brand new in their career on a team. You have 8 people that have never worked before, and you're like, great, we run a live service. They're not going to be equipped to do it. So different levels of experience can tackle different challenges with work. And I strongly believe that you want to try and get people challenged, which means you're not always putting the fastest, most effective person on that thing. So if you're a manager, or if you're a team lead, if you're the more senior person and you're like, man, like I'm the one who always has to put out these fires. Think about how you can try slowing down, right? How can you get some of the more junior people to help with that so that over time they have more experience doing it? And I think that's it for this stream mostly. So this is where I switch over. I do this kind of thing, and I will share links and stuff with folks if you are interested. So this is where I have my newsletter for folks on Substack. You are already in the right spot. Big surprise. So this is it. This was created with Nano Banana, and I think it did almost okay, but like this part of my face is not real. That's not real at all. It's way too smooth. Even this part's pretty smooth, but I think it did okay on this side, but like that's not my eye. There's no way. Not at all. But anyway, that's it. This is just to click on it. You can see this is the newsletter article I was going through. I kind of showed it a little bit earlier. Most of the time, like I said, it's based on a code commute video. So this code commute video, if I jump over to code commute, just to show you quickly, that's this one here. It actually had, I don't know, like my YouTube channels don't get a ton of views. I make a lot of videos, but this one had 4,000 views compared to like, I don't know, 75 to 200. These ones did okay, like 500 to 1,000 kind of range. But yeah, this one had, 4,000 views. That was the topic we did. So again, if you're interested, right, my newsletter articles have the code commute videos right on them. You can check it out. I'm going to go through my other channels and stuff, but I have the Dev Leader podcast. This is where, if I refresh, the YouTube live stream should be going here. And it is. I'm live right now. Surprise. I interview other software developers on this channel, and then I host this live stream on this channel as well. And so some of you might not know these people. I have a couple people that are like .NET developers. So if you're a .NET developer, you might recognize some. So like Hassan Habib, Scott Hanselman, who is a VP at Microsoft. I think like every .NET developer knows Scott Hanselman. Derek Comartin is of Code Opinion. He's really good at explaining things. I love that his content is like there's no bias. He's very good at not having bias when he's walking through things for pros and cons analysis. So really enjoy Derek Comartin. Dev Leader is my main YouTube channel. For folks that don't know, if you want to look at, how to program in C# or AI tools and stuff like that, this is my main channel. So all the goodness is. It's kind of ironic that like, yeah, most of my videos that have performed well are just like old. A lot of my content is like very much picked up in search. So like, 2 years old, 2 years old, 2 years old, 2 years old. This one was about AI, so it didn't take 2 years, a year old. It's just kind of how it goes on this channel. Very slow to grow, but my goal is that I have helpful information for folks. So you can check out Dev Leader. And then Dev Leader Path to Tech I hinted at earlier, but I do resume reviews on this channel. Trying to paste the link in the chat. So you can submit your resume for free. I split this channel and the podcast channel out from my main one to try and help with traffic. I think the answer is right now that's not working at all, but I'm not going back. So whatever, here we are. If you're interested in having your resume be reviewed, you can submit it by watching one of the videos. It'll explain how. What else we got? Code Commute is on Spotify if you want to check it out there. The podcast is also on Spotify, just not the live stream part. Code Commute, if you want to submit questions anonymously, you can go to this page here. There is this little button you check, boop, and then whatever you type here just gets emailed to me. If you're going to submit questions to Code Commute, it helps if you add a lot of context. The more, the better. When I get really generic questions, you kind of get generic answers. So that's how it works. Otherwise, yes, I have courses and stuff. You knew there was going to be a sales pitch, right? I have courses available if you want to learn how to program in C#, or if you're interested in things like career development, getting promoted, behavioral interviews, this kind of stuff. That's on Dome Train. For those of you that don't know Dome Train, especially if you're not a .NET developer, you may not know, but Nick Chapsis is one of the biggest .NET YouTubers in the world, and so he runs Dome Train. He brings on industry professionals that can teach the topics that are on Dome Train. So I got picked. I must be an industry professional. That's right. And so I got to I got to cover the Getting Started in Deep Dive C# courses. So those are two things I'm super proud of. For what it's worth, I lose a bunch of money making YouTube videos from editing costs and that kind of stuff. I would love to say that the ad revenue was so good, but it's terrible. So courses pay for me to have my videos edited and stuff like that. So courses really help cover my content creation. And speaking of content creation, if you're interested in the stuff that I build on the side, Brand Ghost is the social media and cross-posting app that I have built. This is what I use. If you follow me on any social media platform, if you see the posts that I make, it's from Brand Ghost. And so I built Brand Ghost. It's in .NET. It's hosted in Azure. If you ever want to know the tech stack and stuff, I'm happy to share and talk about it. But if you are a small business and you're like, hey, like we're not being consistent with our social media, it takes too much effort to post, send me a message. I'm happy to get you started with Brand Ghost. It's literally completely free to start with cross-posting and scheduling. There's a trial period, but it's also just free for cross-posting and scheduling. You don't have to put a credit card in anywhere. And I feel very confident that if I can get you started and being consistent with this kind of stuff, that you will be interested in the paid-for features because you'll see the benefit that we add. So feel free to reach out to me on any platform if you want to try it out and you're not sure where to start with your content creation. And I am happy to try my best to help. With that said, folks, thank you so much for being here. Next week's live stream, because I'm doing a conference talk on this Thursday, I will be recovering my conference talk on the live stream. It will have code. We'll be going through some C# code, and we'll be talking about plugin architectures. So would love to see you there. Thank you so much. See you next week.